premier institute of the country, Dr. Sir, uh, deans, pre-BC, deans of different faculty, and especially Parag Kalkar, Dr. Junjar Rao, the speaker, today's speaker, Anuradha Deshmukh Madam, my colleague, Dr. Pabrekar, and all the friends who have joined today in this morning. We at RUSA thought that I think this kind of two interventions, they were required because we know that we are at a very difficult juncture. And we have decided to take this last exam, which is a final year exam, on the basis of a decision of a Supreme Court, which is online and on MCQ base. RUSA, I think, is not the only organization to keep on doling out grants, but I think our responsibility is also to improve the overall quality of higher education, to assure the transforming changes in higher education, and especially in evaluation, internal evaluation as well as an external evaluation. So I think we thought at RUSA that in all universities, this kind of intervention, though very late, will be very, very useful. Friends, I think we in coming days are more and more going to use this online medium, not only in the delivery of education, but as the same time in an evaluation of the education. Though we keep on using evaluation and assessment, these two terms, they are mutually exclusive, but then we keep on using it alternatively. I think it is very important that the quality of MCQ and extent of MCQ will decide the success of this particular exam. And at the same time, the new medium through which we are going to take this exam, that is a technology, the understanding of technology and making aware, the students making aware about the technology and use of this technology but during the exam will help to improve the quality of our assessment. So we thought that there will be devised two interventions. And I think as our mandate, we wanted to improve the quality of the MCQ as well as understanding the technology through which the examinations are taken. I am very much thankful to Honorable Vice Chancellor Kalmalkar sir for giving us the opportunity to talk to all those very senior faculty who are already examiners. And I'm very sure you already started working on devising questions. You already started working on giving devising MCQ and formulating the MCQs in your own subject and in various subjects. You all are senior, and I understand that there were many people who must have taken out papers for several years. But in all those papers, the MCQ was a small part encompassing all the units. Now, in this particular paper, the MCQs will be drawn on the entire semester. And that's the reason why it is not just the items which will develop is of only recall type, which is basic recall, but application, analysis, and evaluation. So through MCQ, the learning outcome can be measured, and this measurement of the student learning through this assessment becomes an important part. We keep on talking about teaching and learning, but I think the most important thing is the most weakest link in entire teaching learning exercise in my mind is the assessment of the student. And I think this intervention, though very late, will help you to understand how to, because I think devising MCQ is an art. And this intervention will help us to understand how to use MCQs for asking question on higher order thinking, as well as analysis, application, evaluation. I think we are fortunate enough to have amongst us Anuradha Deshmukh Madam, who has been expert in this field, and I have heard her many times delivering this session. If you already devise your questions, I think you can go through these questions, and on the basis of what inputs today we have received, we can evaluate the way the questions are devised. I think this session is going to help. Thank you very much for joining this session. in a very short notice. And I was sure, I was all the time asking Parag Kalkar sir, whether we could able to reach everyone, whether everyone will join, and I think this is what I like about the university. When university calls for something, we all teachers, they gather around the university in order to maintain the esteem of the university. And I think this particular exercise is very, very important for all of us. Conducting exam in a true sense, conducting it without fault, because one single mistake in MCQ, when it is getting normalized, it will become multifold. And that's the reason why we have to be very, very careful while devising MCQ. How to cover the entire, there are many questions which are asked. Few people ask in their subjects, I think MCQ cannot be devised. For example, people ask about accountancy, about various other subjects, how to develop MCQ in those subjects. I think though this is a 2 hours intervention, and thereafter, I'm sure we will be taking question and answer session. Those who already know, for them it is a revision. For those who are new to this entire exercise, maybe they will get wonderful input. I used to have my one friend called Vasant Poddar. And in the Gandharva Sammelan, whenever Bhimsen Joshi used to start his singing, Vasant Poddar used to ask him, Bua, tumhala rag yetoy na? I think he used to ask to Bhimsen Joshi because of a concern that whether he knows what he is trying to render today. This intervention is same. You all are experts, but out of a concern, we wanted to reiterate that how to draw best and one MCQs which are useful for covering the entire syllabus, and not only covering the basic recall, but covering the higher order thinking as well. I think enjoy this session. Please ask relevant question. You will be definitely, the questions will be answered. And in the beginning, somebody asked me whether some kind of an handout can be given about do's and don'ts about the MCQ. I think we will try and provide that kind of an handout. But this particular session will be available on the YouTube, so you can very easily revise if you desire, going on YouTube as well. I must thank Dr. Zunjar Rao, a modern college, who has come forward immediately after we requested them, Zunjar Rao sir and his team, to give us a support, technology support. And I thank him from bottom of my heart. I think this kind of a principal colleagues who care for higher education, this kind of a teachers who have joined, more than 1,000 teachers have joined this session. I think this kind of a concerned colleague build the higher education system. And it is not the whole huge buildings. It is not that infrastructure, but it is the concern for the student who is only an ultimate stakeholder of an entire exercise of a higher education. Those who are digital native, they understand technology. I was reading a book of Factfulness by Hans Rosalind. I think we always have certain concern about whether the technology integration is there in our system, whether the students have gadgets, whether students have internet connectivity, and we have certain perception. We keep on talking about digital divide. I think when in Mumbai University, in other university, and as well as in Pune University, when survey was taken, we know that there are 87% students who felt that they can give online exam very easily. I think our perception and a fact are different, and many times our perceptions are wrong. So we need to rest on the fact, and of course, there will be 13% more students who feel that they cannot take this exam and they are not digital savvy, they don't have structure. For them, we have to make arrangement. But this digital divide is bridging slowly, and we have to bridge this digital divide by doing certain extraordinary thing, by lending instruments, by giving them facility of OMR or other thing, out-of-box thinking has to be implemented to cover this 13% who desire to take exam offline. I'm sure Honorable Vice Chancellor must have taken several meetings with principal colleagues, with teachers, with examiners, with the management council, with academic council, and you must have a foolproof system in place to conduct this exam, because this is one of the premier institutions of this country and in this Maharashtra, which have always come forward in various ways in order to think out of box for the solutions under the leadership of Dr. Kamakar. I wish RUSA is making a small effort in order to improve the whole structure so that we all are on same page. And I think the student who is an ultimate stakeholder will be benefited through this exercise. Thank you very much, sir, for giving this chance, giving chance for RUSA. Thank you very much, Parag Kalkar, sir, for taking all the efforts, for calling all your colleagues. I think I wish everyone to listen to Madam Deshmukh very carefully, and we will get definitely certain insights which we have not thought of. And I think, please, on the basis of that intervention, we can rethink about our MCQs so that we can build the MCQs desired at a desired quality level. Thank you very much. Over to Parag Kalkar, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Joshi, sir, for his welcome address. I think more than 1,000 participants, we are full in this Zoom session, and then remaining participants, I think the Modern College is taking care to show this link on the YouTube, because for the remaining participants. So I'm very thankful that the faculty has overwhelming response. Now I'll request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Nitin Karmalkar, sir, to have his, deliver the inaugural address.
Very good morning to all. First of all, let me welcome you all, including the panelists, Dr. Vijay Joshi, the consultant to RUSA, Dr. Bambrikar, Dr. Anuradha Deshmukh, my own colleague Parag Kalkar, Zunzara, and the participant overwhelmingly who have joined for this particular session. It's been, I think, a very hectic time for the university, especially during the pandemic. We all know that because of various different reasons, the entire process of examination got delayed. And then the entire thing went to almost Supreme Court, and finally the verdict came out on 28th of last month, and wherein they asked us to follow the UGC guidelines, which to an extent were already there. And then there were a couple of meetings that were held among the vice chancellors with the different authorities, including the minister as well as the governor. And overwhelmingly, we all decided that since there is a time constraint, and therefore we would adopt to go for the MCQ kind of an examination, which will be of short duration and wherein perhaps your critical thinking and rest all other assessment will be feasible. And that's the reason we adopted MCQ, and that too in an online mode. As rightly been pointed out by Dr. Vijay Joshi, I had the meetings almost with everyone, including the faculty, including the board of studies, the members of the board of studies, the chairman of the board of studies, the deans, the academic council, the management council, all the principals. And time and again, we are actually trying to actually make it understand that this is an unprecedented kind of time, and in which we are organizing this particular examination. When sir was telling me, or rather was referring the SPPU as one of the premier institute, obviously the responsibility is more with the institute. And therefore, we have not left any stone unturned to get into this examination system this year. Technologically, obviously, there are challenges, has been referred by Vijayji, that the divide, the urban and rural, and that is the technological divide. But he is right that perception and the reality are two different things. In reality, I could get almost 87% of the students going for online examination. The remaining 13%, we will try taking care of those also. We are going for an agency which would be in a position to provide the necessary devices, as well as wherever there is no internet connectivity, perhaps making use of the technology, they will try to provide even the Wi-Fi out there. And in a day or two, perhaps things would be settled on that particular issue. So I promise you all that there would not be any problem in accessing the internet, in accessing even the devices. We will make all, we'll make you all very comfortable while giving this particular examination. He was mentioning also, Joshiji was mentioning about the difference between assessment and evaluation as such. And when the Supreme Court only has upheld the decision of taking examination, means there is a sanctity that is involved in the examination system that needs to be restored and then needs to be followed also. And from that point of view, basically, we ourselves have decided that perhaps the University of Pune is entirely taking care of the examination system rather than leaving it to the individual colleges or clusters. We have created clusters, but clusters only for the benefit of the student as well as for the faculty. So there's a little decentralization through which there would be an effective sort of a implementation of the method that we adopted. But otherwise, doing the basically devising the question paper and the rest all has been the university's responsibility. And I am pretty sure that you all must have already started working on it. In fact, many of you have worked for NET and SET has been basically again under the umbrella of the University of Pune. So many of you are quite used to it. But again, as I said, this is a very timely intervention. I would not call it the late, although he is mentioning it is a late intervention, but it is not so. It is very timely intervention. Only thing I asked him basically to prepone it a bit, and they have readily agreed on that. And that is how today's session has been happening as such. I'm pretty sure the discussion, deliberations that will go through during this particular workshop or a webinar, you call it, wherein you have multiple experts who to an extent know the tact and the importance of creating MCQ. And perhaps that will to a great extent help and add the sanctity to the question that you create. So I welcome all of them once again. Many times, basically, time is a factor. And this particular examination, everything we got to finish by 31st of October. In fact, the practical examination has already begun. And then the backlogs from 1st of October to 9th of October and 10th onwards till 25th of October, you'll have your last year examination as such. So many times I always remember the commencement address given by Steve Jobs during the Stanford University sort of a function, wherein he keeps on mentioning about one particular thing, that time is limited, and therefore you should not live someone else's life. You should not dodge by the opinions expressed by other people, but actually ground your own opinions and accordingly should work on. And that is the motto with which I keep on working and expect you all to work. I'm pretty sure the way you've been basically joined in this particular webinar as well as come forward during this unprecedented time, I thank every one of you. And thanks are also to RUSA for organizing this very timely sort of a webinar or workshop. So once again, I thank every one of you and welcome all of you. And I leave it back to Parag Kalkar for further proceeding. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your inaugural address. I think the importance of the organizing this kind of workshop, I think, has been rightly elaborated by Honorable Vice Chancellor. Today's session will be conducted by Dr. Anuradha Deshmukh, Madam. Before I request Madam, I would like to introduce Dr. Anuradha Deshmukh. She has completed MA and PhD in psychology. She has completed Diploma in Personal Counseling from Xavier Institute of Counseling, Mumbai. She was university rank holder at all examinations from first year to final year of master's degree. She's a recipient of prizes and scholarship at the college, university level throughout her academic career, including the Government of India Open Merit Scholarship. She started her career as a lecturer in Department of Psychology at Xavier College, Mumbai. Later started career as a counselor cum social worker at Myco Limited. Then moved as a practice as a freelancer for consulting psychiatrists. And then in 1990, she joined in the Yashwantrao Chavan Maharashtra Open University. After serving 25 years service, she retired as professor and director, Center for Collaboration and Special Initiatives. Post-retirement, she started working as a consultancy assignment at different educational institutes and universities. She has also been conducting Skype-based online lectures for faculty training at prestigious Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, IISER Pune. Additionally, have been periodically invited as a resource person for conducting workshops for academic faculty of different education institutes. She has visited many countries for academic purpose. Her biodata is very elaborate. I think I'll request Madam to start her session. Over to Anuradha Deshmukh, Madam. All participants are requested. The link of this recording will be shared to you all. We are enabling the YouTube link also. So do not have any worries at all. And right now you focus on this session. Deshmukh, Madam.
I think somebody has written on in the chat box, we are trying to fix the audio of the YouTube also. So,
yeah. So they will get in, but right now, Anuradha Deshmukh, Madam, will start the session. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, all of you. And at the outset, let me thank the organizers, RUSA, the University of Pune, for this wonderful opportunity of being with all of you at this time. Technology is amazing. Imagine we have around 1,000 participants already, and plus, I would say, who are actively involved in this session. Am I clear? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Oh, all right. Now, a lot has been said by way of the introduction about the importance of today's webinar, especially in view of the latest Supreme Court decision and the decision thereafter taken by each university. To me, this is it's not just a challenge, it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for us academics to rise up to the occasion and do our task well. With respect to multiple choice questions, I'll focus on that right now since that is the topic for today. Let me just share my screen with you for a minute. Okay, so our topic for today would be preparing effective MCQs, or preparing MCQs, I would say, in a scientific manner. All of us, without exception, have seen, experienced, personally constructed MCQs at some point or the other. It may not have been the total question paper, but definitely components of a question paper, either for the end examination or by way of quizzes, tutorials, whatever, or by way of internal assessment. So no one is really new to the challenges, the difficulties, the opportunities that MCQs provide. Although I have been introduced as an expert in the field, I would really like to say, I would submit that I am and always will be a learner in this field of evaluation. But let me just share with you certain experiences of mine, which over the years have helped me to be, I would say, not a better MCQ constructor, but at least probably a more sensitive person with respect to constructing MCQs. Okay, now first of all, let us look at why MCQs are so important. First of all, and you have been witness to this either through the social media or through certain unions and through certain debates that we have among the academics and the students, MCQs are the most widely debated question type. And yet, they are the most extensively used. Extensively because they have been used in a wide variety of fields. Wide variety of academic fields, even at the highest level of competitive examinations. Even today, the GRE, the MAT, the TOEFL, whatever examinations you look at, they do include the MCQs. And therefore, they are definitely definitely used in a variety of fields. They're also used for market research surveys. They're used in the political field. They're used in a variety of areas. They're generally popular. I don't know what exactly is happening. Why are there so many scratches appearing on the screen with some drawing pencils kind of thing?
I think this annotation should be stopped. Somebody is doing annotation on the presentation. Please stop it. And I think technical team should clear it as soon as, please disable annotation. Technical team, please disable annotation. Madam, you go ahead.
Yeah. So now one thing is, although they are debated, although by and large the student community sometimes feels a little apprehensive, by and large they are a popular way of testing. Because in society there is a feeling, and especially among the students, that as compared to other testing formats, the MCQs are relatively easy. That is their perceived ease. Of course, that is possibly because of the nature of MCQs that we are often confronted with. With all this, I must say, MCQs still remain one of the strongest predictors of overall academic performance as compared to other forms of evaluation. Now let us look at some of the advantages of MCQs. I think we are still not able to remove this kind of crisscross lines that are appearing on the screens, but have somehow appeared just now. Hello, can you all see it clearly, or do you see these lines across? There's something yeah, okay, that's good. So now what are some of the major advantages of MCQs? One is they allow for testing large groups in shorter time. Like you have today, so many of you using a technology platform and attending a session, likewise using the online mode, likewise using the MCQs, you can test so many people in a shorter time as compared to other alternative forms of assessment. They can cover a vast expanse of content. What happens in questions which are the so-called subjective type, you are restricted to a few limited questions. And obviously you cannot cover the entire syllabus the way you would have liked to. MCQs, on the other hand, they cover a vast expanse of content. They allow for inclusion of all topics in a single exam, and therefore they can extend the breadth of a student's knowledge testing. They require less time to administer. They're quick and easy to score, as all of you know, because they are very often we use the machine scoring system. So you don't even have to manually score these MCQs. But even if you have to manually score them, they are definitely very easy and quick to score. They're highly reliable in the sense that it does not depend on who is the examiner in terms of marking. So there is less in fact, no subjectivity in marking. And there is no space for examiner bias. So whether I'm a lenient examiner or I'm a strict examiner or I'm an erratic examiner, there is no scope for me in an MCQ kind of format. In that sense, it is a very highly reliable kind of format. Students are not required to formulate an answer. So they don't have to spend time and time trying to organize, having an introduction, having the main part of the answer, and then trying to argue their point. They can directly focus on the content of the question asked. Responses do not require an explanation, and therefore the fate of the student does not depend on his ability to express himself through language. Sometimes a student, and this is your experience, I'm sure, for all of you, that you might be having students who are very bright, who know their content very well, but unfortunately, they are not as good in terms of expressing themselves in language and communicate their thoughts easily. So in that sense, since the MCQs do not require explanations, the fate of the student does not hang basically on his ability to write and express himself. Another very important feature and important advantage of MCQs is there's a possibility of easy creation of multiple versions, obviously with machine assistance. For example, if you have to administer an MCQ kind of examination to a large group at one time in a hall kind of examination hall kind of setting, it is quite possible for you to have different versions of that question paper so that you can eliminate chances of cheating, and also you can have educationally equivalent sets of question papers. Another important feature is also that the MCQs permit easy statistical analysis. See, basically, those who are into the field of evaluation, they would appreciate this much more. Every question, once it is used in a certain examination, one can statistically analyze what has been its difficulty level, what has been its discriminative power, how good is that question in identifying the good students from the poorly prepared students. So this kind of statistical analysis, which is often known as post-validation or an item analysis, this is easily possible with the use of MCQs. So as you will notice, MCQs have very major advantages. Not that they are without their limitations or disadvantages. We'll go through some of these also. The development of good items is time consuming. It is true that to actually develop a good quality MCQ, it is not something like you can just, think of something and write it out. It isn't as easy as that. You have to take time to reflect, to look at the options, to look at the stem and so on. So it is a little time consuming. Another disadvantage which has been quoted is, and that is something that many academics keep feeling, that, oh no, MCQs only test recall and memory-based questions are there, so it doesn't test higher abilities. That is the case because in practice, most of the MCQs that we do come across in examinations, they test these lower level cognitive abilities. But that is not the fault of the MCQ per se. The MCQ is quite capable of testing higher abilities. But the problem remains because in practice, it is easier to design MCQs which test lower levels, and therefore many of our examinations have many of such types of questions, and then they are criticized for testing only memory-based questions. One important disadvantage we must admit is the ability to organize, to express ideas, to build up some argument logically, to create a cohesive kind of answer. All that ability cannot be tested through an MCQ format. We have to be aware of that, because that is only possible through what are known as the, in common parlance, the subjective type of examinations, not the MCQ type. Then there's also at times this criticism that is raised, that is, there are not enough possibilities for giving partial credit. Like if you have a short answer question, say carrying 5 marks or 6 marks or whatever, you do as an examiner give a few marks for if the student has some cursory knowledge of that topic, and better marks if he's answered a better answer. With respect to MCQs, giving this kind of partial credit is not possible. especially this very straightforward MCQ types. At times you do have MCQs of the multiple selection type, where maybe you can give a little bit of credit for some right answers. But by and large, possibilities of giving partial credit, 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3 marks, that is not possible. So therefore, they don't get credit for whatever little bits of knowledge they have with respect to a certain subject. Then again, one important drawback is people do say that people can guess the right answers with respect to MCQs. Guessing is a possibility. Nobody can deny it. So normally what has been done is either you increase the number of options in a certain MCQ, rather than have a binary choice like a true or false. An MCQ is a much better format because you have 4 options or 5 options, whatever. Then again, increasing the length of the question paper, that is having more MCQs, that is also a way of trying to reduce the number of right guesses a student can have. So but the possibility still remains, and there are approaches, like there are people who talk about giving negative marks and how much of negative marking. That differs from institution to institution and their own policies. But yes, one cannot definitely say that there is no guessing possible. Guessing is possible. It is our responsibility to see to it that our MCQs are designed in such a way that they do not give so much of a scope for guessing. Now, we have been talking about MCQs, but basically let us also know what are the different types of MCQs we can actually formulate. You have a simple kind of MCQ, which all of you are aware of, which is something like a statement, an incomplete statement ending with something like a dash, 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 or you could have a direct question, and then either a question or an incomplete statement. All of these constitute what is known as the stem of the question. And then you have different options numbered as A, B, C, D, labeled as A, B, C, D, or sometimes numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4. Though the more common format is labeling the options as A, B, C, and D. So you have the component which is the stem, and you have the component which is the options component. Now, among the options, one of them is the correct answer, which is the key, or the keyed response that we call, which is the correct answer, or sometimes the best answer. So you might have an MCQ where all the options are correct, but one is more correct, or one is probably better than the others. So that is the best answer. So you have to decide what kind of MCQ you're designing, whether you want one answer which is correct, ask them to choose the right answer, or the best answer. So that is called the key, or the keyed response, or the keyed option. And the others are called distractors. Why are they called distractors? Because the purpose is that a well-prepared student should be drawn towards the key, whereas the student who is not so well prepared would be distracted possibly by the other options. So they distract the student from the right answer if you're not very well prepared. And our challenge then is to see to it that these distractors are very close to the key and yet not the key. So there is one definite unequivocal right answer, and the others are close to it but not exactly the key. So this is the structure of a simple MCQ, the stem and the options, and among the options you have the key as well as the distractors. Now let us look at some of the variations that we can have in this simple MCQ. One is called the multiple selection type. In this type, you can have more than one correct answer. And then how would you deal with it? Through a MCQ format. So you have the stem. You can have 2 levels of options. In the first level, there may be a number of statements which you can mark as small a, small b, small c, small d. And then you could have the options actually from which the student has to choose could be marked as A, B, C, and D, as we have said earlier. The student only chooses the correct answer from these. For example, the options from which the student has to choose could be something like only small a, or B both A and small d, or C could be both B and C. So there could be more than one correct answer, and the student has to identify both if required. Then D could be all A, B, and C are correct. For example, I want to make this clearer with the help of example. Look at this question on history. Read the following statements regarding World War II, labeled as A, B, C, and D, and choose the correct option from capital A, B, C, and D based on them. Now, all these are statements regarding World War II. Small a, the war was fought during the period 1939 to 45. B, Winston Churchill was the British Prime Minister when the war was declared. C, Italy fought against Germany during this war. And D, USA entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, what is it that you are going to ask the student to do? He will look at each of these statements and then check, is this right or wrong? The war was fought during the period 39 to 45. Yes, that is true. Winston Churchill was the British PM when the war was declared. He was not the PM when the war was declared. That time it was Chamberlain who was the PM. So this is the wrong answer. And it is an efficient distractor also. Italy fought against Germany. Sorry, Italy fought with Germany, along with Germany during this war. USA entered the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which is correct. So now you have two things that are correct, two statements, A and D. And therefore, out of these options, is only A correct? Is A and D correct? Are B and C correct? Are A, B, and C correct? The answer is both A and D are correct, and therefore the student chooses option B. See now how you have moved from a very simple kind of MCQ to something that is a slightly more complex one, and something that can make the student think. Okay, let's move on to another type, the ranking type. Excuse me, I'm again seeing some of these marks on my presentation. Is there some issue? I really don't know what is happening. Okay. Okay, ranking type. Now, ranking type or reordering type, for example, you could have some process, some event, something that can be broken up into steps or sub-steps. And then you expect the student to rank these or reorder these in a different way. For example, this will make it clearer. The very, very simple example, it may not apply to the level of students you're dealing with, but yes, the type is something that you have to focus on. Chemistry. Which of the following represents the correct sequence of steps to be followed in the process of distillation of water? Okay, so one is option A, allow vapor to rise, cool vapor, boil water in a vapor, collect the vapor in a separate container. This is one. Boil water in a, now all these are again interchanged. Boil water in a beaker, allow vapor to rise. So the same components, but they are in different combinations. And the student has to look at, okay, distillation, what has to be done first? Okay, you first must boil water in a beaker. Then what happens after boiling? Vapor will rise. Once the vapor rises, you allow it to cool. Once it cools, you collect it somewhere else. That is these are the basic steps in distillation. So he will look for all these, think of what distillation involves, and then choose the right answer based on this kind of thinking. So what has happened is the same thing. Otherwise, what you would have probably asked is in a question in MCQ, what is distillation, or what is the important advantage of distillation, and then you ask him to choose. But here you're making him do something else. You're actually testing his understanding of the process. And that is how you make him think a little ahead. And ranking type of questions can be used for even very highly complex processes. The assertion reason type. This is also an excellent kind of format, especially when you want to design questions which are more demanding in terms of students' level of thinking. So basically you have two parallel columns, okay? One consists of an assertion, and one is a reason. Okay. Now, for example, the assertion could be iron expands when heated. This is just one statement. Okay. Somewhere else there's a reason. Molecules move more rapidly when heated. Okay. Now, what is it that you are instructing the student to do? He has to mark A if both the assertion and the reason are true, and the reason is a correct explanation of the assertion. Meaning that if molecules moving rapidly because of heat is the correct cause of iron expanding when heated, then he will mark this. And if both these are true. Sometimes it can be that the assertion is true, but the reason is wrong. So if both the assertion and reason are true statements, it can be like this also. The assertion is true, the reason is true, but the reason is not an explanation of this assertion. C is if the assertion is a true statement, but the reason is a false statement. You can have many more combinations. If both the assertion and the reason are false statements. Now, you expect the student to understand a cause-effect relationship. It is not just a factual kind of piece of information that, okay, iron expands when heated, or molecules remove rapidly when heated, whatever. It's not just that. He should be able to link these two, see the cause-effect relationship, see whether the cause-effect relationship is correctly reflected in any one of the options, and choose accordingly. So here, this assertion reason type of format lends itself to a variety of subject disciplines. And especially in the sciences, you can definitely get the students to reason using this kind of format. The matching type. Now, matching, so all of us have seen right from our school days, you have two groups and then you match. But this can be made a little more complex. I'm talking about the matching type, which is expressed in the multiple choice format. So list A will have some elements, some components. List B will have certain other elements. And list B typically will be having more items, more components as compared to list A, so that you again reduce the guessing from the part of the student. So for example, if you leave the two as equal, what is likely is if the student knows out of say 4 choices, he knows 3. The fourth one he just guesses because there's only one accompaniment that is left free for him to choose. So we want to eliminate that. Necessarily have the two lists of unequal length, have list B as a little longer, and list A has fewer components. And then after you have presented the student with both the lists, you give them options A, B, C, and D, where A could be, say, one component of list A mapped with the third component of list B, and so on right up to the end. And then he will choose the right form of matching of all the components of list A with list B, and that is how he chooses the right answer. So this is a very good way of testing whether students can understand the relationships between concepts, between different terms, between symbols, between concepts. So how do you test their understanding of this relationship? How will you test whether they're able to reason out with these? This is all possible through the matching type item, which is converted into a multiple choice format. So these are some of the formats which you can use when you are constructing your MCQs. Even if you have already constructed some MCQs by way of your preparation now, you can still convert some of these. You can still convert them into something like a multiple selection type of format. Get the students to think a little bit. Matching type. So this will make it a more challenging exercise, both for you as well as for the student, and also a more relevant and a more just exercise in terms of your course. Excuse me, where are the organizers? I am still getting this kind of interference in my slides with pencil marks all over. What exactly is happening is...
Madam, this is Dr. Anjali Sardesai. A request to you, please. If you see on your screen only, there is one option named as a stop annotations. So if you could do this, because from my side, I'm not able to do the things. I'm trying it since long ago, but it's a request that click on your share screen. That is, you are viewing your name or you are sharing your screen. Over there, there is an option called as a view options. So please click on
but
that.
There is nothing like that on my annotate. Okay, there is one annotate.
So we can stop annotations. There is one option to stop the annotations, and at my side I'm not able to get that. A kind request to the participant who is troubling the speaker. We all are teachers. It's a kind request. Do not disturb the speaker, please. It's I think it is Jagtap Dipali. So it's a kind request. I'm announcing your name. This is very irritating to all of us. Please. Hello. Otherwise, I will have to remove this participant. This is very insulting to remove someone from the meeting. It's a kind request. Please do not annotate anyone. Ma'am, you may please continue. I will look into this. I'm so sorry for this disturbance to you.
Okay. No, it's a little obstructing for me, and I think for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anyway.
Madam.
Okay. All right. Now, so these were the different types of options that we have for the multiple choice questions. And as I said, for each of your disciplines, look at where you can apply these types. Okay. Now here, classification type. Here is also another very interesting kind of multiple choice question. Now sometimes you might have very many elements belonging to a certain concept, or that fit into a certain principle, or certain properties with respect to something. And all that you have to do is expect the student to identify which are the properties or which are the elements which belong to a group, and which is the one that is not belonging to that group. So there is a principle that they have to identify. If you have an assorted set of elements, what is it that runs in common with all of these? And what is it that one probably sticks out as the odd one out? So this is the way you classify the different elements in a group. Find out which element is not part of the group. Okay. For example, there's a very, very simple question for those in the field of computer science. Which of these is not a web browser? Now the word not is emphasized, made bold, underlined, and that's important. So now what are web browsers? Students should know. What are the different types of web browsers available today? Students should know. Now, if you have a mixture of several web browsers, one of which is not a web browser, can the student identify? Can he classify those that belong to the category called web browsers and the ones that don't? So here is an example. Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, Microsoft Office. Obviously, Microsoft Office is not a web browser, so he has to select. So he is essentially classifying. Here's something in the field of psychology. The medical treatment of disorders like schizophrenia, paranoia, and the like is best handled by which of the following specialists? A neurologist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a psychiatric social worker. Now, all these are specialists. But now, what kind of disorders are we looking at? Schizophrenia, paranoia, etc. So we are looking at behavioral disorders. Then we are also looking at the medical treatment of these behavioral disorders. While a psychologist deals with behavior disorders, he is not equipped to prescribe drugs. He is not equipped to prescribe medicines. The medical treatment of disorders can only be handled by a psychiatrist. A psychiatric social worker is definitely involved in the healing process and so on, but from a different perspective. He looks into the family setting, what are the economic compulsions of the patient, the family members, he tries to build up interpersonal relations and so on. A neurologist is looking into the nervous system. Okay, so what is it that the student has to identify? He has to identify one thing, that these are mental disorders. He is not asked any treatment of disorders, a medical treatment, all these options are similar because they are all dealing with specialists treating some disorder. But we are looking at that person who is ideally equipped to deal with the medical treatment of disorders. So there is a classification involved. Classification in terms of what are mental disorders, which are these types, and then the experts, which expert can do what. Okay. Now, my very important submission to all of you would be, suppose you know that there are different types of MCQs possible. What kind of MCQs should appear in your exam paper? Should you have questions which are testing memory, or should you not have? Should you have questions testing critical thinking, reasoning, or should you not have? The whole question arises because we have to actually see what is it we expect from our students. And if you look at the syllabus of all your courses, all these courses have certain objectives written in the syllabus. They have certain learning outcomes, I'm sure, that are listed out. And our task as teachers would be to see that not only we have an aligned curriculum. What is aligned curriculum? That the course objectives, meaning what is it you want to teach the students from the teacher's perspective, the actual course content in terms of the books that you give and so on, your teaching methodology, all of that should also be geared towards these objectives. And finally, your assessment should be a measure of the outcomes of learning. Your syllabus defines the learning outcomes. For example, in a subject like, say, classical physics, you might be expecting the objectives could be to enable the students to compare certain concepts, or to enable them to evaluate certain theories or whatever, or certain principles in physics and so on, or to expose the students to something. Now, if the objective is to introduce, to expose, to orient, and without any objective like expecting them to think critically and so on, then yes, you're perfectly justified in having questions which do not test too many of the higher mental functions. But if the course objective demands that the student should be able to compare certain concepts, that the student should be able to relate things, different concepts, that the student should be able to transfer his knowledge to different situations, that the student should be able to evaluate, to infer. If that is the course objective, then it becomes our responsibility to see that that course objective is tested through our evaluation mechanisms. And therefore, when you design your multiple choice questions, see what is the level you want to reach when you design your MCQs. Now, Benjamin Bloom, most of you must have heard about him. He was an educational psychologist who in the 1950s actually gave us a whole framework with respect to objectives and modes of functioning, human functioning. Bloom has been credited with something that we still today as educationists do adopt. Though there have been people who have modified Bloom's basic framework, there are people who have suggested revisions. By and large, in higher education today, we are still looking at Bloom's framework. And Bloom talks about learning objectives, and he also talks about modes or domains of human functioning. Why is all this important for you? It will be clearer a little later. We, as teachers, are wanting to study our students who function at three levels. There is the cognitive domain, which deals with knowing, thinking, understanding, remembering, and so on. There is the affective domain. All our students have their own emotions, their own attitudes, beliefs, likes, values, dislikes, and so on. Their fears about examinations and so on. And there is the psychomotor domain, which involves the use of the parts of your body, actions of the body, coordination, and so on. For example, when you're doing lab work, it's not just how much the student knows, it is how well he's able to deal with laboratory material. When he's doing a computer programming kind of activity, there are some psychomotor skills also involved. So the student as a whole is required to operate across all these domains. However, in higher education, most of our evaluation concentrates on the cognitive domain. There are attempts made where I think especially in your internal assessment, you do give some marks possibly to how far the student is attentive in class and how far he's regular in his work and how far he is cooperative. I don't know, what are his leadership qualities and so on. So some part of it could be covered in the affective domain. But by and large, our examinations, end examinations especially, focus on the cognitive domain. And then when we look at our MCQs, we are looking at this domain. How do we test the cognitive domain? How do we test the students' memory, recall, knowing, thinking, understanding, reasoning, etc.? So Bloom has come up with a taxonomy of objectives in the cognitive domain. Now, this is something that all of us must really focus on. According to Bloom, the lowest level of cognitive thinking is at what he calls the knowledge level or the information level. When you ask students who is the author of something, what is the definition of something, then who did what, or when was this, where did this happen, all this is possibly based on his recall of certain facts, memory based. Okay, this is factual information. At the base is the factual information. Once the student has that base of factual information, he can move on to a higher level, which is comprehension. What happens in comprehension? Comprehension shows understanding. Not only is he able to give the name of the author of a book, not only is he able to identify a date, which is very important possibly, but he's also able to explain what is the significance of that, or what is the main idea of that book. So comprehension is something where he can explain. So he can explain that he can understand. Understanding or comprehension is slightly higher than knowledge. Beyond comprehension is application. Suppose you teach a student, I would say, let me give my own disciplines example. Suppose you're teaching them different types of conflicts. Okay, you teach them what is an approach conflict or an approach avoidance conflict. That is understood. But when you put it in a situation in real life, or you give a simulation and the student is able to transfer that knowledge or understanding that he has acquired to a different situation, that is when you talk of application. So giving it to applying whatever is learned to a new situation, something that is not in your textbook, but the principles of which are derived from your textbook. Sometimes you might have complaints from students saying, oh, this was out of the syllabus. No. Don't give them something which is out of the syllabus altogether. But if a certain concept is explained in the syllabus in your books, and you are just expecting the student to apply it to a different setup which is not given in your textbooks, that becomes application. And definitely you should consider asking questions of the application. Analysis, as the word implies, is breaking up something. Suppose you have a whole concept, and that concept is, can you break it up into its various elements? Suppose there's a theory. Then can that theory be broken up into its main constituents? So can you break up a whole into some smaller parts? Analysis is an ability which is higher than application. Synthesis is which is a higher ability. It is creating some whole. So there are different elements and you have to formulate something. You have to synthesize, you have to compose. All this is synthesis, which is a still higher ability. And according to Bloom, the highest mental ability, cognitive ability, is that of evaluation, where you judge something. You give some kind of a value based on whatever is the data you have been provided with. You determine something and with a proper argument for it. So evaluation is the highest mental ability. There are differences. There are some theorists who say that synthesis is a higher ability than evaluation. Evaluation is probably not the highest, but by and large, this is the accepted kind of taxonomy. This taxonomy shows you a kind of a lower to higher level progression, and knowledge and comprehension are considered to be the lower level mental abilities, whereas application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation are the higher cognitive abilities. What Dr. Joshi was talking about a little earlier was, can we test some of these higher abilities through MCQs? That is what we have to look at. Definitely we can test knowledge comprehension, and one disadvantage which has been claimed for MCQs is they only test memory and recall. That is because most of the times we limit ourselves to only knowledge and comprehension. We have not tried to move ahead, and that is what our attempt should be. So this is Bloom's taxonomy, and then as I talk to you, we must look at our own courses, see what are the course objectives, see what is the teaching learning methodology we have used, what kind of pedagogy we have used, what is the instructional material we have provided, what are the learning outcomes that we expect from the students, and our evaluation or our MCQs or whatever tool we use should be a proper assessment of these. So if, as I said, if your objective is that the student should be able to explain something and should be able to define something, should be able to give the elements of something, then yes, you can stick to knowledge and comprehension. But if your course demands, and at the third year, the final year, I'm sure each of you in your respective disciplines, they do expect that the courses will demand higher levels, and that is why you must attempt some of these. Now, if this is the case, let us see how we can improve the quality of our multiple choice questions. What are some of the do's and don'ts or the guidelines of what I would say? One is decide whether the items, in multiple choice, normally we don't talk of questions, we talk of items, because you could have an incomplete statement, so you don't call it a question. So they are called items. They are often called, instead of a question bank, we often talk of it as an item bank. Okay. So decide whether the item is the right answer or the best answer. I had talked about this earlier. It could be one and one only correct answer, or it could be the best among all the possible answers. So that is what you have to decide in the beginning. Ensure that the content covers an important testing area. One problem with MCQs that does occur is when you have very little time and you are expected to prepare a lot of MCQs in a short time, what we tend to do is we just, fill up the question paper with a lot of questions which really are not important testing points. For example, in the faculty of nursing, now the questions, most of these that I'm giving you now are questions that have appeared in question papers for different courses in different examinations of different institutions. Now, for example, in a nursing paper, this was Florence Nightingale was born on 12th June 1820, 12th May 1840, 12th June, 12th May. Now, truly, is it really important for the student to remember that, yes, she was born on 12th May and not on 12th June? Is that significant? Or what was her contribution was much more significant? So let us see to it that the content covers an important testing area. Let us be convinced that what we are asking is not just to fill up the number of questions as per requirement, but something that is an important testing point. Avoid items, requiring mere rote memorization of facts. Now, rote memorization, learning by heart. For example, this ICDS program. Now, this International Integrated Child Development Services program is one of the largest community-based programs that have ever come about. But what is the importance of this program? What was its contribution? What was its impact? Probably that is more important than remembering just the date. In a course like statistics, a question like, the product moment correlation, coefficient of correlation was developed by Gossett, Fisher, Spearman, and Pearson. Yes, undoubtedly the students should know the name of the person who developed the product moment correlation coefficient method. Pearson is important, but more important possibly would be an item like this. The product, what does the product moment coefficient of correlation give you? It is used to determine the degree of relationship between two dichotomous variables, a dichotomous variable and a continuous variable, two continuous variables, a discrete and a continuous variable. So now you are actually testing not just his memory of that name. The name is important. Both Pearson and Spearman and Fisher, in fact, are definitely important for statisticians. But apart from this, can you design this question in a little different way so that you test the understanding of what is meant by product moment correlation coefficient? Okay, express items as precisely and clearly as possible. See, the whole thing is we do not want to have the students reading a question over and over and over and over again to understand what is the implication of the question. So, for example, in carrying out scientific research, the type of hypothesis which indicates the direction in which the experimenter expects the results to occur once the data has been analyzed is known as a or an. What is the improved version? A hypothesis which indicates the expected result of a study is called simple. The crux of the question is already there. But instead of having a complicated, clumsy kind of construction, use something that is clear and precise. Use simple language. Don't bombard the student with too much of verbiage. Avoid jargon. Now, jargon in questions can be definitely avoided. Sometimes what happens is when we are designing MCQs, we pick up sentences from the textbook which they have studied and just remove one part of it as a fill in the blank, and again we expect the student to choose. So what do you have to do? See, for example, instead of saying a test is valid when it produces consistent scores over time, correlates well with the parallel form, this is in testing, psychological testing, measures what it purports to measure, has representative norms. Now this is a little more difficult for the student. Rather than that, make it a little simpler. Measure what is the validity of a test determined by the consistency of its scores with that of a parallel form, correlating its scores with a criterion, and evaluating the usefulness of its norms. So make it, don't pick up words and phrases directly from the textbook. See to it that the student understands the purpose of the question. Avoid questions based on opinions is of course very true, especially in the social sciences. Sometimes I have seen questions in the field of philosophy which are based on opinions. It is not advisable to ask in an MCQ format what is an opinion with respect to a question, because there's no right or wrong answer about it. Maybe in an essay type of question where you can ask the student for his opinion and ask for a justification for that opinion and assess him on how well he can justify his opinion, that in that context it may be applicable, but not in an MCQ format. Ensure that the STEM states the task or the problem completely but without unnecessary words and information. Here's an example. World War II was. Now just see, World War II was, it's such an incomplete kind of STEM. Now what are the options given? The result of the failure of the League of Nations. One option. Horrible. This has appeared in an exam paper, not my creation, please. Fought in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Fought during the period of 39 to 45. Now, what is it that the test designer wants the student to know? He wants the student to know when the war was fought. Then what are these options? They are quite useless. For example, an option like World War II was horrible. Why would you penalize me as a student if I say that yes, World War II was horrible? It was horrible. But you actually wanting the student to know that this is a very important date. So why don't you have a question where you're probably confusing the student with different dates? So this is how you make your options also a little more important and more, what should I say, the distractors should be what are called functional distractors, not non-functional distractors. See now here, another example. This is from physiology, and Yeah. General physiology and biochemistry. Simple diffusion. What about simple diffusion? Then the student has to read the entire thing to understand what it is that the examiner or the paper setter wants by way of this concept of simple diffusion. So instead of that, put it in the stem, let the stem be complete, and the options are then very concise. Physiology, gastrin. What about gastrin? Gastrin is produced by oxyntic cells. It enhances gastric secretion, is a gastric enzyme, digests protein and carbohydrates. So don't keep a stem which is incomplete. Let the stem define the task. At times I would even recommend put the stem in the question format so that the focus of the question is very clear to the student. He does not have to read all the options to understand what is it that the paper setter has in mind. We don't want the student to try and guess what is going on in the paper setter's mind. We want them to be objectively directed towards their task. Okay. Avoid repetition in options. Now, repetition in options can be by, how will you do it? By including common content in the STEM itself. Now, here is an example in physics. Okay. All these are questions that have come about again. Equation of continuity in fluid dynamics expresses the law of conservation of charge, the law of conservation of mass, the law of conservation of angular momentum, none of these. Now, it is true that these are laws of conservation of whatever, which are important by their full names, but you don't want the student to spend his time reading the entire thing. So, what you can do is, you can convert this into a question format. I say which type of law of conservation, what is it? Law of conservation of which type? Charge, mass, angular momentum. These could be the options, but the whole thing could be included in the step. Look at this in exercise therapy. During aerobic exercise in a normal person, heart rate increases, heart rate decreases, heart rate remains constant, heart rate fluctuates abruptly. Why don't we make it a simple question format? What happens to the heart rate during aerobic exercise in a normal person? Then the options could be as neat and simple as increases, decreases, remains constant, and fluctuates abruptly. So this is some way you can modify your own questions. Verify that the options are mutually exclusive and not overlapping. This is not very commonly seen, but it does occur. Like this was in a psychological testing paper. What should be the index of difficulty for an effective mastery model test item? Less than 10, less than 20, more than 80, more than 90. Something that is more than 90 is certainly more than 80. Something that is less than 20, right, is something that is less than 10 is also less than 20, right? So why do we have overlapping options? Why don't we then convert the options into less than 10, between 10 and 20, between 80 and 85, more than 80? So all of them are mutually exclusive. There are no two possible right answers. This is something we have to be careful about. Ensure that all options are plausible and relevant to the content. Now, this is something which is very important. Your options must be all, for the ill-prepared student, all should be possible answers. For the well-prepared student, yes, they should be driven to the right answer. If you have something like the product of two odd permutations is odd, even, both odd and even, and none of these. Now, something that is odd and something that is even, is there something that is left out? Both odd and even. This would be a non-functioning distractor. Even an ill-prepared student would never be drawn to an option like this. So you have to reword these options. I don't know whether, I'm not a maths person, but maybe something that are they always odd, always even, or of mostly odd, sometimes even, mostly even, sometimes odd, whatever. You can make those combinations so that the student is better guided, and also the distractors function as distractors. Ensure that no irrelevant clues like language, grammar, etc. are given. For example, a question like this. A test which may be scored merely by counting the correct responses is an ... test. Now, if you look at all the options, suppose I don't know anything about the subject matter. I'm totally blissfully unaware of the content. I look at the way this question is framed and I say, okay, this is an. Consistent does not fit in with an. Objective fits in with an. Stable doesn't fit with an. Standardized doesn't fit with an. What am I left with? Objective. So without knowing the content, I'm drawn to the correct answer. Okay. So this is something, see that your language, the grammar you use, that doesn't give any kind of clues to the student. This question could have been written like this. A test which may be scored by counting the correct responses is said to be consistent, objective, stable, standardized. We are using the same objectives, but we have changed the step. Avoid obvious clues. Sometimes unknowingly we do give these clues. Look at this example. The disorder due to excess of thyroid hormones is called. Suppose I don't know anything about hormones. I read cretinism, I read tetany, acromegaly, thyrotoxicosis. Okay, this is something about thyroid. So this probably is the right answer. And yes, it is. So I have guessed the right answer without knowing anything about it. So why have I given this kind of clue? Anatomy. This is also a question that appeared. The special visceral efferent component of the facial nerve. Remember, we are talking of the facial nerve. Arises from superior salivatory nucleus, carries taste sensation from anterior 2/3 of the tongue, supplies muscles of facial expression, carries cutaneous sensation from the skin of the auricle. Now here, again, I don't know anything. I keep thinking there's nothing about face over here. This is something to do with the facial nerve, and so something about facial expression. This must be the right answer. I'm lucky. So this is what I'm getting clues for without knowing anything about the subject matter. The key answer should also not get identified because of its specificity or its technical nature. Now look at this example in physiology. The following hormones increase the level of intracellular cyclic AMP except. Now adrenaline hormone, glucagon, parathyroid hormone, 1.25-DHCC. Now if I am a student, I look at all these options and I say, these are quite different. There's one thing that looks quite different. This seems to be something very specific. Maybe it's the correct answer. So I guess this is how I'm guessing and getting more marks out of guessing. Look at this example in nutrition and biochemistry. 1 calorie is equal to 48 joules, 3.5 joules, 4 joules, 4.184 joules. Now tell me, is this not directly leading the student to the correct answer without his knowing anything about it? So this is something that you should take care. Don't make one answer. Sometimes you can have an answer which is extremely, an option which is very long as compared to the others, and that is the key. So don't distract or direct the student towards the right answer because of extraneous factors. Eliminate irrelevant information or sources of difficulty. Sometimes this is seen in mathematics problems or maybe in the field of management where you're giving a case study and you're asking questions based on that. You give a lot of information, some of which is relevant, some of which is irrelevant. It is true that sometimes your purpose might be for you to identify whether the student can sort out what is relevant from irrelevant. But in most cases, that is not your purpose. And in which case you should avoid what is irrelevant. In a mathematical problem, as it is, the students are finding it difficult to solve the numerical problem. You bombard them with numbers which are of no consequence for that problem. Then they are unnecessarily distracted from the right path. Okay, keep all options homogeneous in content. If you're talking about properties of something, see that all the options deal with properties. If you're dealing with the authors, then see that all of them are authors. If so, everything in the options should be similar in terms of, I would say, content. There is a homogeneity in the content. Something is not totally way out. Place options in a logical or numerical order. Now, this is just by way of an advice, and I'm sure most of you would follow it. This is a question that appeared in a biology paper. In embryology. The week of intrauterine life when the formation of primordial follicles begins is the 3rd week, 7th week, 8th week, 1st week. Why is 1st week suddenly appearing in a disjointed fashion? Either you have your options framed in a way that is an ascending order, or you have your options framed in a descending order. Let there be a logic to it so that nothing is given about that option which suddenly draws your attention towards that option. So if you have something progressing first week, third week, fifth week, seventh week, whatever it is, then there's a kind of a logic that is built up. No option is getting additional importance or additional attention, I would say, because of the way it is placed. Again, another question in life science. Which of the following types of DNA is a left-handed helix? A, Z, B, C. Why don't we have it in alphabetical order? That does not require any additional effort on the part of the paper setter or the item designer. He just has to observe this kind of sequence. Consider using direct questions instead of weak, incomplete statements. Now, this is something that I would always recommend. Sometimes we use questions with ending with a dash. But then the focus of that question, the thrust of that question is not often very clear to the student unless he reads the entire question with its options. So ask a direct question then, if that is going to happen, instead of an incomplete statement. And in case of incomplete statements, I'm saying even you can use them, but the blank should be always at the end of the stem, in the latter half of that stem, rather than at the beginning. See, dash dash mainly absorbs water. So if a student reads only the stem, nothing makes sense to him. Unless he reads all the options, then only he will do it. And this item is of course defective from many points of view. Look at this option like all of these. Can it at all fit grammatically over here? So it is a non-functioning distractor. It does not perform the function of being an effective distractor. It's a very wrong use of all of these. Apart from that, having a blank at the beginning, even in normal day-to-day life, when you ask a question or when you're asking a student, you don't say dash 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 something. You ask a question and then there is a build-up of that question, a thrust of that question, the focus of that question that builds up. And that is why the dash should be towards the end of the stem. Do not use options like all of the above. Ideally, do not use options like all of the above at all. If at all you have to use them in that kind of format which I explained to you, the multiple selection type, where you have 3 or 4 different components, maybe more than one is correct, and you are expecting the student to say A and D, B and C, C and D, A, B and C, A, B, C and D. So all of the above can be possible, but not in this kind of question. Here the question is very defective from many points of view, but this is an example. All of the above doesn't even fit in over here, if you will notice. Grammatically it doesn't read. Use none of the above rarely and appropriately. If used, ensure that it is the right answer occasionally. Now, what often happens, I have seen item writers, they find it easy to write 3 options, but for the 4th, they just can't think of a 4th option. So they directly write none of the above. Thinking that, okay, now I have to prepare 4 options, so I have completed that task for myself. But none of the above, one thing should fit in directly with the question. That is one thing. But secondly, try to use it rarely, and if at all, use it appropriately. And if you have a question paper carrying say 50 questions or 100 questions or whatever, see to it that somewhere where if you use none of the above say 4 or 5 times, see that somewhere at least your none of the above is the answer key, so that the student doesn't leave out none of the above as a non-functional distractor. These are some of the important things that you have to bear in mind. Try to make items positively worded. Avoid negative words, and if you see that they are emphasized, which of the following is not an example of, or which of the following doesn't fit into something, does not fit into, or which of the following is different from, so these words, or which of the following is not, so I have given an example. So anything they use which is never, not, these words, if at all you use them, see to it that you use capital letters, bold, underline, whatever way, so that the student is directed towards a task that he has to look for something that does not apply. Ensure that the item, this is very true, it is not biased towards or offensive towards any culture or religious group. This I would specially request groups of the Faculty of Social Sciences to be particular about these things. It does not happen so much in the physical sciences, but or in fields like management also, maybe you've got to be very sure that you don't offend any group or community. Okay, verify that the items are not dependent on other items in the test. Now, sometimes when you, I'm not talking about a single item. Suppose you have a test consisting of many items. Sometimes it so happens that one question has certain options given which become the lead or which provide the clue to the right answer to another question. Let us see, a small example could be, for example, in English literature, the author of David Copperfield was, okay? You can say, you can have different options. Somerset Maugham, you can have Jane Austen, of course you can have, you have Charles Dickens, P.G. Wodehouse. Charles Dickens is the right answer. But now, suppose somewhere later in the question paper, you say, the main character in Dickens, David Copperfield, showed this. So what had happened? The student has been able to identify. He didn't know that David Copperfield was written by Charles Dickens, but in another question, he has found the answer to the original question. So see that items are not dependent on other items in the test. And again, in a test, ensure that the keyed answer is randomized. There is something like a psychological set people have. Some people have a preference for a C kind of response. Some people like to have their answer key always towards the end. Some people have a preference for, say, alphabet A. That happens. So what we have to guard against is, see that sometimes it is A, sometimes it is B, sometimes it is C, sometimes it is D. Ideally, if they are balanced, good, or at least if they are randomized, so that the students don't do tic-tac-toe and then say, okay, A, and the 5 answers, A is the correct answer. So maybe even if I don't know, I'll put an A and guess. So that is what we have to avoid. Ensure that this is randomized. These are some of the guidelines you have to follow when you prepare multiple choice questions. These are the do's and don'ts. Some of these things happen to us unintentionally, but we have to guard against this. And the next task would be for us that suppose we have prepared multiple choice questions already, okay? Like some of you have already prepared your questions. You are ready to submit your questions for your question banks for the university, whatever. Now you might think, now it's so late, but can you not review your questions? Can you not improve on the quality? And what this is a checklist I have provided for you to review your own prepared MCQs. Look at the item as a whole. Does the item measure an important mental ability? Ask yourself these questions. Or is it something trivial that you're asking? Is the content of the item important or trivial? Are the educational objective and difficulty level of the item correctly stated? I would in fact add, when you are submitting items for your question bank, see to it that along with the item, along with the answer key, you also write, provide information about which is the educational objective that item is testing. Is it testing knowledge? Is it testing comprehension? Is it testing application or certain other higher ability? What is the difficulty level of the item? Meaning the perceived difficulty level from the point of view of the students, not your difficulty level as you judge it. That how far do you think this item would be considered as a difficult item or an easy item by the students? And it has been shown by research that normally in a test, items which have say about 50% difficulty level, that is, that 50% of the students would be able to answer that item correctly. Those items, if they're included in a test generally, they give the maximum discrimination between the well-prepared students and the not so well-prepared students. So along with the item, state the educational objective, identify its difficulty level, that is your judgment, of the difficulty level. And also I would add, what is the estimated time? How much time do you think a student would take for responding to this question? Okay, that is also something that you should do. Is the answer likely to be correctly identified by approximately half of the group of students? That's what I was trying to say. That is the best kind of thing in a difficulty level. Can the answer be guessed by a student who knows nothing about the subject? This is something again I talked about. Sometimes the distractor is a non-functioning distractor. Nobody's drawn towards it. He's drawn to the correct answer purely by guessing. The language, data, arithmetical operations, etc. given in the item conveyed in a simple, easy to understand form. Now these are the questions that you will be answering yourself. If you have prepared some 100 questions, look at this checklist and answer for yourself. If you feel that there is some defect somewhere, here's an opportunity for you to improve upon it. Is the item biased towards some group? Is there excess verbiage, data that is likely to confuse or mislead the student? Is there a trick or catch in the question? See, our attempt is not to trap the student. That is not our purpose. Our purpose is to identify how much the student knows, to what level he knows. So we let us avoid these tricks and catches in the question if possible. Let us be very clear in what we expect. Look at the stem. Now that was the item as a whole. Look at the stem now. Does the stem state the task or problem completely without unnecessary words or information? Is the stem worded clearly and concisely? Is the stem worded positively? If not, are the negative words appropriately emphasized? We talked about this. Then look at all the options. Are there repeated words in the options that can be included in the stem? If so, again, go back to your question, modify the stem, put whatever is the repetition part of it, include it in the stem, probably make it into a question format if that is easier, do that. Are the essential differences between the options clear? That is, there are no overlapping options also, they are distinctly different options. Are the options mutually exclusive? And where relevant, are the options expressed in logical order, alphabetically, numerically, period-wise, whatever it is. So, so that is something that you must look at for the options as a whole. Look at the key. Are you convinced that the key is correctly marked? Is it unequivocally the correct or the best answer? And let me give you my own experience as when I have been, because I have edited, I would say, thousands of questions in various disciplines so far. And I was looking at a subject in computer science. Now this, all of you will agree, there's something very definite about what should be right and what should be wrong. And I was amazed when I was looking at during the editing, that when the same item was looked at by another expert, they came up with a different answer. And this set me thinking, what is wrong? Now, if that is the case, that there are two possible right answers, you know what can happen in an examination with students that can create chaos later on. So you have to be convinced that the key is correct. Can it be improved in clarity or correctness? If you find that there are 2 or 3 experts who disagree about the right answer, then probably there is something that gives us information that this question needs modification. It needs improvement. It needs sharpening so that the correct answer is unequivocally correct. Check the distractors. Are any of the distractors as completely correct as the key? Now we want the distractors to be close to the key, but they should not also be correct. So again, you can have the kind of situation that I mentioned earlier. Do the distractors appear plausible without being the correct answer? Sometimes the distractors, one is there is an unequivocally correct key, but the options, 1 or 2 options might be such that they just can never apply. And if they can never apply, they are not plausible distractors. They are non-functioning distractors. So we have to check whether they appear plausible without being the correct answer. Do any distractors use words which make them obviously wrong such that they are hardly likely to be picked up by students? This is a checklist for you. Now, what are some of the commonly asked questions that you might have in mind? I've often come across certain questions that criticism about MCQs, and you may be yourself debating with people that no, MCQ is not a good option, or no, MCQ has its limitations. So let us answer some of these questions that are commonly asked. Is it easier to score in MCQs as compared to other question forms? What would be your answer? My answer would be that will depend on what sort of MCQs are included in your question paper. Yes, if you include all questions testing purely recall and memory, then yes, rather than answer some essay type questions, or as they are technically known as supply type questions, short answers, long answers, where the student has to think, reason, compose, all of that, yes, as compared to that, MCQs would be easier. But if you really frame good quality MCQs, it's not necessarily the case. Can one increase one's score by guessing? Yes, to some extent. But we can, as I mentioned earlier, if you make your options really very close to the correct answer, but yet not the correct answer, if you make the distractors like this, then the chances of guessing are reduced. If you increase the number of options, that also the guessing element can be reduced. If you increase the number of test items in the question paper, the amount of guessing can be reduced. And of course, you can apply if required, if the policy so dictates. There are cases where they apply the guessing formula, which is not always advocated as the best method though. Where sometimes they have, if for every 3 wrong answers cut 1 mark, or every 4 answers cut 1 mark, sometimes every wrong answer drop 1 mark. But then this results sometimes in, what shall I say, decimal scores and so on. So that is not a very neat format. But yes, one can increase one's score by guessing to some extent. Our attempt should be to try and reduce it. Are there greater chances of cheating by students on MCQs? This is one allegation that is often made of MCQs. Oh, people can cheat so easily, it's so easy to do so. Well, yes, it would be. If you look at a mass conducted examination in one big hall and you give one MCQ test to all, there are possibilities that students devise their own ways of giving the indications as to, for question number 5, the answer is D, for question number 10, the answer is C, and so on. They have their own ways. But there are ways of dealing with that problem also. For example, in a mass conducted examination, you can definitely have the same question paper in 4 versions where the ordering of the sequence of the questions can be changed. And the distribution of the question paper can be such that the person sitting in front of me, behind me, to my left, to my right, they will have different versions of the same question paper. So I cannot signal to the student to my left that for question number 8, the answer is C. For him, his question number 8 would be totally different. A still more advanced way would be to keep the sequence the same, but to change the order of the options if there is no logical sequence required. That can also be done. So there are ways by which you can deal with this kind of cheating exercise. And of course, when you have an online kind of examination, you can have multiple versions of question papers, multiple question papers which are parallel, educational equivalent, so the chances of cheating are hardly existing. How many options should a multiple choice item have? Now, there has been a lot of research here. The research shows that the options could be something like true or false is a binary multiple choice, basically. So obviously true or false can result in a lot of cheating. But you could have something like, there have been research, suppose you have 3 options, suppose you have 4 options, suppose you have 5 options. What is it that gives more reliable test results? And by and large, evaluation experts have come to the conclusion that a 4-option format is a good enough format for having a reliable kind of a test. What is the optimum time required for answering an MCQ? This is an interesting question that is sometimes asked, because that is what decides for us how many questions we should include in a question paper. Well, I would answer it this way. Depends on the complexity of the questions that you are using, and also the difficulty level, the educational objective. All of you will agree that if it is simply like who is the author of so-and-so book and you give options, it's going to take a few seconds for the student, maybe 15, 20, 25, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, that's all for answering. But if it is something that is going to be requiring more thinking, more reasoning, some kind of calculation like in mathematics or statistics, whatever, or if it is an accountancy where there is some kind of tabulation that is required, or some graph that is to be interpreted, or some kind of case study for which you have to answer questions, yes, the answering time is going to differ. There has been a considerable research done on this also, and they have found that discipline-wise or subject-wise, there are differences in the kind of time that is required. It has been found that, say, at the undergraduate level, when students are finishing their examinations, probably ready to appear for an exam like GRE, which is the kind of level that your students are at, final year students. There they have found that for subjects like the art subjects like economics, then even subjects like education, geography, history, philosophy, political science, psychology, sociology, they've even tested music, for example, where there are theory questions possible. Then the time per item in minutes or seconds changes. For example, they say it takes between 0.74 to 1.06 minutes. So on an average, about 54 seconds to answer one MCQ on an average. For the languages, it has been found that it takes about, again, similar 52 seconds. For subjects like, say, computer science, biology, chemistry, physics, engineering subjects, engineering, drawing, and all the subjects that take more time, geology, maths, and so on, they take the average time is generally higher. The average time has been found to be about 1.7 minutes per question, where there are some easy questions and some more difficult ones requiring calculations. Some questions might go up to about 2.5 minutes also for solving. Some questions might be solved within, say, about 50 seconds. So that is the kind of research that has been shown. So it is whatever is the policy that has been decided by your university, by your boards of studies, by your respective deans, for your own faculty, that will determine how many questions you should be asking in 1 hour and what sort of questions, what difficulty level and so on. Is it possible to develop MCQs for all courses and disciplines? I was reminded of this when Professor Joshi did mention there are some doubts among people that we can't develop MCQs for all subjects. So the languages, for the literature, people often complain that, oh, literature is something where you can't have MCQs. We expect the student to be able to write out, compose, something. Well, there are limitations, to be honest. Yes, there are, but it is still possible to test different cognitive abilities through MCQs for all courses and disciplines. I'll give you certain examples of disciplines where you think that it's not possible, but let's look at it. Can one test higher mental abilities with MCQs? Yes, definitely we can, and we shall see how we can do that. Now look at some examples. Mathematics, for example, the slope of the straight line with 2 connecting points determined by the 1-point formula, 2-point. These are certain freely available web resources, not taken from question papers. But yes, these are examples of how different disciplines also can test through the multiple choice format. Here's an example in biology. Dissolved substances like sugar, mineral salts, and amino acids are the contents of. You can make these more difficult. These are simple questions. When a charged particle, this is in physics, moves at right angle to a magnetic field, the quantity that changes is, see now this is a slightly harder question. You're not just asking for a definition of momentum or a definition of what energy means and so on, but you're asking the student to identify what is it, what is meant by, you're not asking to explain or choose the right answer for the meaning of moment of inertia. You're giving him some kind of example and you're asking him to choose. Commerce, financial management. People feel that that is not possible to test through my MCQ format. But yes, here's a question. Instead of asking a whole kind of question on what is the purpose of financial management and justify your answer, you can ask simply, what is the primary goal of financial management is to? What is the primary goal? Is it to maximize the return? Is it to minimize the risk? Is it to maximize the wealth of owners? Is it to maximize profit? Now, these are close enough options to be functioning as effective distractors, and yet you have one and one correct answer. Engineering drawing, for example. Architectural drafters generally prefer to use dash drawings to help illustrate three-dimensional views of a structure. You can have isometric, perspective, orthographic, auxiliary. Perspective is the right answer. So what type of drawings? Now it is true you might not be able to ask the student to draw a certain kind of, give us, as architects would. But yes, you can give a drawing shown as a stimulus in the question paper to which the student responds. Accountancy. Now they talk of balance sheets. So bills receivable appear in a company's balance sheet under the subhead current investments, cash equivalents, trade receivables, short-term loans and advances. Now here, again, in a subject like, in a topic like the drawing up balance sheets, here again you can ask multiple choice questions. It is not impossible. I know it is a tough task. It is something that requires more effort on your part, more time possibly. But yes, the challenge is there, the opportunity is there, and we have to look at it. Strategic management. The BCG matrix is based on industry attractiveness. Now here, see, there's a combination. This could be a slightly more difficult question as compared to just what is meant by the BCG matrix. It is based on industry attractiveness and business strength, industry growth rate and business strength, industry attractiveness and relative market share, industry growth rate and relative market share. Now here you have different options, different combinations of each. The student might know one, but he has to reason out, think a little bit before he comes to the right answer, which is D. Look at this question in English. Now, identify the correct meaning of the underlined phrase. The authorities took him to task for his negligence. Now, the underlined phrases took him to task. Now, you want him to understand the meaning of the phrase. But rather than asking him, took him to task means what? So here they've given, what is the correct way of representing took him to task? Gave him additional work, suspended his assignment, reprimanded him, or forced him to resign. Now look at these options, they're very effective options. Yes, reprimanded him is probably the correct answer. So this is a way you have tested his understanding of certain phrases, but through an MCQ type of format. Now look at certain higher mental abilities. How will you test some of these higher abilities? MCQs can be used, I repeat, can be used for testing higher mental abilities like application, analysis, synthesis, etc. Especially by using a context like a table, a graph, a picture, or a screenshot, or a video. Since you're using online examinations, you can definitely use screenshots also, or a simulation. Students doing the faculty trying to develop questions with programming, they can definitely use screenshots, videos, simulation, or they can use a scenario with a passage or a narration or a case study. So all these can, when you use these and ask the student questions based on this, where the answer is not just a question of a definition or a meaning of a term or the name of a theorist, it is something much more. For example, look at this question in English. Okay, select the pair which has the same relationship for the following. Now, what is the question? Pain is to sedative. There are options given A, B, C, and D. Comfort is to stimulant, grief is to consolation, trance is to narcotic, ache is to extraction. What is it the student is required to do? He's supposed to try and understand what is the relationship here that is indicated in this kind of combination of pain and sedative. Probably he will come to the answer that yes, a sedative helps to alleviate, to remove pain. If that is it is a function of a sedative to remove this, then which fits in here? Stimulant does not remove comfort. Narcotic probably ends up giving you a trance rather than removes a trance. Consolation, yes, it can help to alleviate grief. Extraction, it can give an ache, not remove an ache. Yes, the answer is B. So what has he done? This is not a very simple level kind of choice that you've given. You are asking a student to do an analogy between what is given here and what could be given here. And that kind of using of analogies, verbal analogies, is a verbal reasoning kind of test item, which is again tested through your MCQ format. In literature also, if you look at some of the examples in your GRE literature illustrative items, you will come across excellent examples of passages drawn from works of literature. It could be poetry, it could be excellent compositions, excellent essays, and then questions framed on the basis of these. So if at the third year level, you're expecting students not only to summarize things or explain the meaning of the central idea or central theme of some book, you're expecting them to do something more, then definitely you can test these capabilities through giving such kind of passages. So it involves giving a prose or poetry passage followed by a group of questions. You can have one passage and a number of questions so that you reduce the reading time of the student. Rather than have one question based on one question, another passage, another question. So have a cluster of say 4 or 5 questions based on one kind of passage. It could be something, an extract drawn from a classic or some drama or whatever it is. Okay, so you can use stems with the functions of the word, something like pick up from that passage and say this and this, that the function of this word is primarily to. Then you give different options. So which of the following statements best conveys that? And you give different options. Which of the following can be reasonably inferred from? You're expecting the student to infer something. And you give options that make him do some kind of inference, some kind of judgment, some kind of evaluation level. So here you are using your higher mental abilities for, using the MCQ for testing higher mental abilities. Now here I'm giving you an example of a question item which you can change. Suppose you've already prepared a question. You are already in the task, doing the task. You want to change it and you want to make it a little more, slightly more difficult, maybe application oriented and so on. Suppose your original question is like this. Which of the following best describes what is meant by formative assessment? A, it is based on the student's attitudes, interests and values. It is designed primarily to evaluate learning, is usually high stakes, and provides information to modify teaching and learning, which is here. Sorry, by mistake, I've marked it as C. This should be marked as D. So D is the correct answer. A, B, C, and D, that should be the way it is worded. This is a typographical mistake on my part. Okay, so this should have been D. Provides information to modify teaching and learning. Now, the same concept of formative assessment, suppose we just use it in an applied setting. In school, for example, you will often come across teachers who reward their students with a smiley, or they reward the students with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So a teacher uses a strategy called thumbs up or thumbs down with her students. This illustrates the use of affective assessment, formative assessment, diagnostic assessment, summative assessment. So the concept of summative assessment, formative assessment, instead of asking for an explanation of it through different options, you give a situation and then ask how this has been applied for that concept. So this is a flipped item from an original item. One more example I would give from nursing. Now this, again, somebody is making marks on the slides. I don't know what is happening. Anyway.
Pranoti Kade, please don't do it.
Okay. Which of the following assessment findings, or suppose this is the original item, which of the following assessment findings is characteristic of a patient with Parkinson's disease? Suppose a student has been taught these are the symptoms of Parkinson's. Parkinsonism. And so the correct answer is that it's a shuffling gait the patient has. So this is a very direct question. Night blindness, pain in lower extremities, shuffling gait, incontinence. So he has to find out. For Parkinson's, yes, shuffling gait is the right answer. This is a much easier question. Of course, he has to know the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, but beyond that, once he knows, it is probably at the knowledge of comprehension level. But here's a question which is the same thing has been changed into an application kind of question. A nurse is making a home visit to a 75-year-old male who has had Parkinson's disease for the past 5 years. Which of the following has the greatest implication for this patient's care? A, the patient's wife tells the nurse that the grandchildren have not visited for over a month. B, the nurse notes that there are numerous throw rugs throughout the patient's home. C, the patient has a towel wrapped around his neck that his wife uses to wipe her husband's face. And D, the patient is sitting in an armchair and the nurse notes that he is gripping the arms of the chair. Now, if he has Parkinson's disease, he has a shuffling gait, obviously the chances of his falling are high, and therefore having throw rugs around the home would help him to not let himself get injured. So the nurse notes that there are numerous throw rugs throughout the patient's home. Now here, this is the correct answer. So this is the important answer. This has greatest implication for his care. This is what is important that the nurse should do. You know, in the field of medicine also, you could have a whole case given and then what is the probable diagnosis or what is the best form of treatment. Again, a case study can be given. The same can be done in the field of management science. The same can be done in a subject like sociology or psychology if you're testing mental illnesses, or if you're trying to, it can be used in a variety of disciplines. You can also use problems like this in the field of mathematics. So it is our imagination, our own creativity that is going to be tested. Here's an example in a subject like physics where we've used a diagram. In the diagram below, parallel light rays pass through a convex lens and converge to a focus. They can be made parallel again by placing a concave lens at point B, concave lens at point C, second convex lens at point A, and second convex lens at point C. See now here, rather than asking a direct question, a diagram is given. The student has to know the principle of light. You has to understand the concept of a convex lens and a concave lens. He has to understand what is meant by focal point. He has to understand refraction. All these things are tested directly through a diagrammatic format. And simple question like this. So here I have given you examples of different fields where you can use MCQs. Fields as, what shall I say, rich as a field of literature in language, fields as intense as mathematics or physics. It could be computer science. There also you can give programming tasks, you can do coding tasks, you can give. And there are so many examples you can see even on the web if you search of how they have made them very interesting examples. Yes, these questions will take more time. Now your task would be to balance how many questions you've got to ask, how much time the student will take to respond, how many questions you will include with higher difficulty level. Nobody is recommending that you should have all questions of this type. Nobody is recommending that you should have all questions of the information memory type. You have to have a combination in your own discipline, subject discipline, with your own experts, your own deans. They will be the best persons to decide what should be the right combination. But this is basically for you to get a clear idea of what we are talking about when we talk of MCQs. In conclusion, I would say writing for good quality MCQs is a skill. It is a skill that can be acquired with training and practice. It is not something that we cannot achieve. And I would say that all of us are learners in the process, something that I began with even for myself. Even if I have been in this field for several years, even if I have edited thousands of questions on in a variety of fields, variety of subject domains, I will still maintain that when I construct an MCQ, I'm definitely likely to make some error unintentionally, which just skipped my mind, which probably another expert will be able to point out. And I have to be academically open to this exercise that yes, I can improve with training and with practice. Despite all the controversy that surrounds the use of MCQs, they still remain a preferred question format for many evaluation experts. There's no denying the fact this is a very versatile kind of question format. And you may argue one way or the other, it still is a preferred format for many. It does not solve all problems. It does have limitations, but yet it is a preferred format. And now this is something that I'm always very vociferous about. Among the three interrelated processes in education, namely teaching, learning, and evaluation, evaluation, my dear friends, remains unfortunately the weakest link. For decades on end, there have been examination reforms. The UGC has come out with so many recommendations, and yet the most, I would say, uncatered, underserved link is evaluation. And yet, from the student's point of view, it is the most important determiner for their future lives, their future career. So we owe it to the students to take this task seriously, that evaluation has to be scientific, has to be valid, reliable, and it should relate to what should be the course objectives and the course outcomes. We therefore owe it to our students and to society at large that we take this task of item writing of MCQs very seriously. All the best to all of you, and I hope I have made myself clear. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think before I do summing up, Madam, may I request Sardesai Madam to ask few questions with your permission?
Yes, please go ahead, Madam.
Sardesai Madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please ask question.
Thank you so much, Madam, for such a wonderful session. We are just watching the chats on Zoom also and on YouTube also. Everyone is very, very happy to listen to your session, Madam. And the remarks are very, very nice remarks you have received. So congratulations and thank you so much. There are some questions on YouTube. Those I will just read out. 3-4 questions are there. The first question is how to assess students for numerical topics with the mark and in an average time of 1 minute. For example, topics of operations research as a LPP, transportation, etc. The question is asked by Mohammed Pathan, sir.
How will you ask numerical questions carrying 1 mark?
Yeah.
See, now this is something that I think it must be your subject experts who will be able to identify which kind of question should carry 1 mark or 2 marks or how much time. Now, if it is a numerical problem which is going to require more time and more computational work, then maybe I would say your subject expert would say, okay, it is a question that could qualify for 2 marks. But this is entirely your subject domain. There is no right one answer to it, how it can be done for 1 mark. You can have definitely 1 mark questions. If they are very simple, yes, they can carry 1 mark. But it all depends on the complexity of the question, the estimated answering time, the educational objective that that question caters to.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is how to decide marks of MCQ. That question is asked by Ratnakar Valzade, sir. How to decide the marks of MCQ? So how many marks to be given for a particular question?
So it is a general practice to give 1 mark for 1 item. That is a general commonly observed practice. However, there are situations, for example, if it's a graph, you have to analyze the graph, you have to, or there's a trends analysis that you have to do, some computation that you have to do, or maybe in literature where answering time, maybe the question may not be very difficult, but yes, it is going to take up a lot of time for the student. In such cases, you might be justified in giving up to 2 marks. But by and large, the practice would be 1 mark, 1 question.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question is, please guide about some types of MCQ for the subject Commerce and Management. Question is asked by Dheeraj Jalte.
I think I gave some example from the field of commerce. In fact, I don't think there is any difficulty in any of the subjects in commerce. There are some doubts expressed by people who teach courses like accountancy, but I purposely gave an example from accountancy to explain that there are possibilities. You have to be able to break up a concept, whatever be the field you're looking at. Be it commerce, be it medicine, be it anatomy, be it mathematics, be it English, be it sociology, whatever. You have to be able to break up that, look at a testing component or testing point, see how you can break it up into components, and then design an MCQ. There is no one defined answer for management, for commerce, which is different. It is possible, is for sure.
Thank you, ma'am. One more question is there. What about the difficulty level and discrimination index? It will be better to prepare table of content for such thing. Deepak Shendkar sir has asked this question.
See, this is a matter of statistical analysis. As I said, now at your stage right now, you're framing questions. But what can be done, and this is possible through an online examination. Once a certain question paper is used in an examination, say in the final year exams when you have it. After that, it is possible to statistically analyze what percentage of students answered that item correctly. Okay, that gives you the difficulty level of the question. There are formulae available for that. Likewise, for the discriminative part of the item, there's called a DI index, the discriminative index, for which you get a value of up to 1. And there are statistical ways where you can calculate what is the discriminative index for a certain item. Again, after it has been used in an examination, where you have data of how students have performed. And then you talk of the discriminative index as being 0.4 or 0.5 or 0.6. But this is a little beyond your immediate task. That is it.
Madam, one more question. Please send a template for paper setting. Anna Sahib Varade sir, he has said.
Madam, this will be sent by the examination department.
Yes, sir.
And not
yes,
by
sir.
honorable speaker.
Yes,
so,
sir.
the guidelines for preparing MCQs are already being prepared at our Board of Examinations. And I think that will be shared along with the template with all of you. It is already being shared with the Board of Studies chairman by today afternoon, and then everybody will get it. Madam is just giving how to prepare it.
Yes, sir. Sir, some four questions are there. So may I please take those questions?
Please, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, Pune University has instructed to frame questions easy, medium, and hard in pattern. What is the criteria for such a vague terms? Is the question that is asked.
See, normally, an easy question would be a question that is answered correctly by, say, about 80% of the students, whoever is your target group. Okay. A difficult question, which in your judgment, okay, when you are setting the question, you're writing the question, in your assessment, this question would be answered correctly by 80% of the students. So up to 80%. So that is an easy question. A question that is answered correctly by, say, only about 20% of the students, that follows in the difficult level. And questions in between are the average level of difficulty. And as I mentioned to you earlier, it is advisable that when you frame questions for a question bank, you have more questions with the medium level of difficulty, because statistical analysis has shown that it shows the greatest amount of discrimination between the well-prepared students and the ill-prepared students.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. For science subjects, there is a semester pattern. Total marks for science subjects, these are 40 per paper. And we have asked that there should be the question paper for 50 marks. I think this again will go
this
to
is the
the
question will be
exam
answered
section.
in a post-lunch
Yes.
session. We have
Yes, sir.
it has already been put in circular published by the examination department.
Yes, sir.
Technical things you are requested to, I think, follow the university guidelines.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I think there are certain questions to be answered by the university, because there has to be uniformity in the setting of question paper. So there are certain questions about things which have been asked, cannot be asked by an expert. So please ask questions which are, I think Madam can answer. So
Yes,
there are certain questions which I think, as you know, in a second session, there will be elaborate discussion and question. And as Honorable Dean has mentioned, this will be circulated to all concerned.
Yeah, like for example, how many questions you should ask, how many questions you should have which are difficult. All these things will be definitely what your faculty, your deans decide as policy by
because
the
it will be a policy at the university end, common for all courses and all faculties in the university.
So please allow the all the deans, PVC and VC to frame a faculty policy for university. Don't ask Anuradha Madam to frame for you.
It's already being done now. It is under the publication process. So I'll summarize the session, and then I'll request Anjali Madam to propose vote of thanks. I would like to first put thanks to our Honorable Speaker, Anuradha Deshmukh Madam. I think when we talk about MCQ, it looks very easy. Okay, it's MCQ, just we have to click an answer because we are on the other end. A lot of time when we get out of railways or some good airlines, I think they send immediate some questionnaire, I think, on mobile, and then we answer a few questions or some shopping things, I think. But technically speaking, the evaluation of the student based on the knowledge he has acquired during the session, I think it looks very easy, but in lucid language, I think you have shared with us the scientific way of preparing MCQ. That is more important. It's not MCQ just to ask some question and then find out what is best choice, I think. You have very rightly told what are the do's and don'ts, because there are chances because of the paucity of the time I think we have in our hand to prepare so many question papers, MCQs before this end of this month. I think the do's and don'ts with an example, I think you have elaborated, I think which will definitely help all of us. Elaborative, descriptive, I think there has to be more clarity when your framework, it should not be ambiguous. Simplicity, I think, is more important because there should not be create confusion. You have told that avoid multiple meaning words, using multiple meaning words so that the student will not get confused. I think, and then the last important thing which I thought, that the checklist for reviewing MCQ, because whenever we frame, suddenly we find that it is correct, but when other person reads that MCQ, he may find that some phrase or some grammatical mistakes are possible, I think. We'll be sharing this video with all our teachers on a separate YouTube link. We'll be preparing because of the recording we have prepared. It will take 2 or 3 hours time after the recording is complete. So everybody will get all these things. So don't say share PPT and all these things. You will get all the session of Madam at the end of the evening on your WhatsApp and on your Telegram group from the Savitribai Phule Pune University. Now I'll request Dr. Anjali Sardesai Madam from the Modern College to propose formal vote of thanks for today's morning session.
Thank you so much, sir. At the start, from the organizers, we thank RUSA Maharashtra for such an timely and most important initiative taken to assist and guide the stakeholders of colleges in Maharashtra. Special thanks to Honorable Dr. Vijay Joshi sir, who is the Chief Consultant of RUSA Maharashtra, for organizing this webinar and guiding all of us. Thanks, sir, for the inaugural speech and important points covered in his speech. A real sense of inspiration and motivation in very inclusive mode of communication. Thank you so much, sir. A great sense of gratitude to Honorable Dr. P.N. Pavarekar, sir, who is a senior consultant RUSA Maharashtra, who has played a key role in the initialization of this webinar, has taken tremendous efforts to organize and coordinate the event. Without his involvement and guidance, this webinar would not have been taken place. I must mention the most perfect documentation and follow-up of Dr. Pavarekar, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Savitribai Phule Pune University, one of the most prestigious university in India, has played a very, very noble role in this very unique situation arised in this century. SPPU has taken very good initiative in online mode of teaching learning, development of e-content, providing e-content to staff and students through its own repository in an online manner. Many thanks to Honorable Professor Dr. Nitin Karmakar sir, Vice Chancellor SPPU, and all his team for all such initiatives taken well in advance and providing constant guidance throughout. Special thanks to respected VC sir for the guidance in today's session. Dr. Parag Kalkar sir, Dean of Faculty of Commerce, SPPU, who is a coordinator of this webinar session for morning and afternoon, both the sessions. Many thanks, sir, for all the efforts you have taken to conduct this session and the pains that you have taken to coordinate this session. I remember the last call we made, it was at 8 o'clock yesterday, and since morning we are still online. So thank you so much, sir, for all your efforts you have taken for organizing this particular seminar. Dr. Anuradha Deshmukh madam, who is a today's speaker and resource person. All of us will agree to the knowledge we have gained through this session today. Looking at the comments in the chat box, we can very proudly say that this is the excellent session we have ever heard and best guidance we received about how to generate the MCQs, what are the do's and don'ts about the MCQs, checklists to prepare MCQs, how to prepare and frame the questions, how to define the proper answers, and all the related key points related to MCQs. This was the most needed session for all of us, the teachers, the paper setters, not for this time only, but for hence onwards, forever, most required guidance. Thank you so much, sir, madam, from the organizers and especially from the paper setters and teachers. Thanks to SPPU technical team for the Zoom platform access for this webinar. As mentioned by Honorable Dr. Vijay Joshi sir in his speech, thanks to Dr. R.S. Hunzarao sir, Principal of Modern College of Arts, Science and Commerce, Shivajinagar, Pune 5, for all his efforts taken in the organization of this event and coordinating the session, and always there for us, for guiding us. We, as Modern College, propose special thanks to RUSA and SPPU for giving us opportunity to co-host this program and provide technical support and coordination thereby. Myself, in a capacity of IQSC coordinator of the college, head Department of Animation and chairperson of Modern Media Station, the official YouTube channel of the college, would like to thank the technical team members, Professor Samir Nirlekar and Professor Yogendra Vaidya, for all the technical support provided to make this program live on Modern Media Station, which is an official YouTube channel of our college. Most importantly, the organizers propose many thanks to the audience of today's session. That is all the teachers, college exam officers, controller of examinations of colleges, head of the departments, vice principals, principals and directors of higher education institutes. Within a very short period of notice, I would especially mention this because the email was sent by SPPU in last 2 days, and all the communication was done through respected Kalkar sir in last 2 days. And we are proud to see that we have received overwhelming response for this session. Many thanks to all the participants for a very active participation and very huge response given for this particular session. We are happy to mention that we have exceeded Zoom participants of capacity 1000 through direct participation, and on YouTube channel we have more than 300 live participants who are watching this session currently. Thanks to all. This shows the concern of all the teachers towards the perfection in their work and urge to learn more things. Thank you so much. This session is divided into 2 parts. First session has come to an end, which was specially for the paper setters and teachers. The post-lunch session will start at 3 p.m., which is for principals, directors, COEs and CEOs of all the higher education institutes. On behalf of organizers, we request principals, directors, college exam officers and controller of examinations of colleges to attend the session and join the link at 2:45 p.m. Thank you all. With the permission of all the dignitaries, we come to the end of this session. Thank you so much. Thanks once again. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Parag sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Deshmukh madam, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. In fact, one comment I would just like to mention to all of you.
Sure.
Pune University has been the leader in evaluation reform in the past. In fact, among the few universities in the country which took up examination reform, it was Pune University, along with SNDT, which years back established exam reform units around. So you are the leaders, so continue to be so.
They always will remain leaders.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kind words. Sardesai madam, can you please end the meeting?
Yes, sir. I'm ending. I'll end the streaming first and then I'll end the meeting. Thank you so much, sir.
See you all again at 3 p.m.